guys, welcome back to Z's Corner. This is Al. So I've gotten some requests to do more PvP and crew related videos, and it's a pretty big area for me to kind of just say, I can do a video around crewing or I can do a video around PvP. There's a lot of questions to answer. Basically, it's like, the first question is what's your best ship? What ship are you going to use? And then who's your opponent? What type of ships are you fighting? Basically, so I've been thinking about it a lot, and instead of doing any type of generic PvP recurring video, I'm just going to kind of focus on the ships, I think, from the start, or maybe the officers, and then go from there. So that kind of brings me to the topic of today's video, which is really going to be around the Korinar. The Korinar is and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I always call it the Korinar. So anyway, it's the G4 Rare Klingon ship. It's my favorite G4 Rare ship out of all three of them. I don't have a Newton, so I can't really say how that performs except for what I've seen it do in PvP. And unless it's been crewed specifically to be, let's say, anti-Korinar, anti-explorer, my Korinar has been able to defeat the Newtons that I've come across. So based on my experience with, I guess, the Pylum and the Korinar, and what I've seen of the Newton, basically, I'd say that my favorite ship of them all for the G4 Rares is the Korinar. So why is this my favorite ship? Basically because it hits really hard. And we can take a look at that. And I think it really punches above its weight. So I've had success defeating Enterprise A's with this. And I can also two-shot, I guess, baby Corvuses, which is the G5 Uncommon. So I've done that before, and we can take a look at a couple of screenshots as to what I mean by that. But I've got my Korinar pulled up right now. She's in dock. I've got just kind of an example PvP crew for the ship. This is my second ship. My first ship is the G5 Uncommon Corvus. So because it's my second ship, I don't put the Yuki combo on here, and I use the TNG crew quite a bit. So this is my basic, I would say, PvP crew for the Korinar, with TOS O'Hara as captain and TOS Kirk on the side to proc morale, mainly because morale is needed for TOS O'Hara's officer and captain abilities. This is really to counter HG Worf. And the third officer right now I've got on is Marcus. I'll switch between Marcus and Khan, basically, depending on the takeover that we're playing in or the opponent's ship that I'm fighting. Basically, I try and have my strongest ship, the Corvus, to be counter the biggest enemy ship that I could find. So let's say we're doing a takeover and someone's there with a North Cut. Then I'd probably have Yuki, Khan, HG, Worf on the Corvus, and that would leave my Korinar then with a setup like this, which is TNG, TOS O'Hara, TOS Kirk, and then Marcus. So again, this type of setup would make the Korinar a very strong anti-explorer type fighter. And for the most part, when I'm in takeovers and we're fighting, I try and keep it so that my ships are more or less on target in terms of their crews. So what I mean by that is, the Corvus can obviously take down most ships anyway, but I would use it primarily to take down like the North Cut with Kong on there, or other interceptors, or even larger battleships. So like the Newton or any large Sarcos that are on nodes. And then with the Korinar, that kind of frees it up to be kind of an anti-explorer and anti-interceptor type crew. And I would actively avoid using my Korinar to hit any type of large battleship, such as a decently tiered Newton or a large Sarco, because they would do outsized damage to my Korinar, and the repair costs and all that stuff is not not really worth it to kind of do that. So, you know, actively for each TC, I use 2 primary warships that I can control, and that way I can kind of balance out between which opponents gets hit with which ship. So let's take a quick look at the Korinar. So back on the main topic here, if we look at the ship itself, one of the things I wanted to show you guys, I've been kind of talking about looking everywhere on your screen when you get a chance for the little eye, the information button. And if you take a look here on the weapon mounts, here's an example of one of my weapons. It's the phaser turret. It's an energy weapon. If I click the eye, so the eye little button was right there. This pulls up all sorts of useful information. They have min damage, max damage, the amount of armor pierce you do, the amount of shield pierce you do, the accuracy, critical hit chance, critical damage. And at the very bottom, this is some pretty key info. 3 things here, right here. Charge time. This means when the weapon first fires. So a charge time of 1 means that it fires in round 1. Reach charge time, it means how many rounds it takes for it to recharge. So this means it won't fire again until round 3. And then number of shots. So this weapon has 3 shots. So in round 1, 3 of my shots are coming from these phaser turrets, and it's an energy weapon. And real quick, you know, the green part is if I've upgraded the weapon, this is the increase in stats it would give me, and the white component is what I have right now, which is a Mark 8, a Tier A component on this ship. And then if we look at the others, here's a phaser bank, which is another energy weapon. Again, same thing. If we click on the eye, you notice that the damage on this energy weapon, energy mount is actually much lower than the one prior. So you know it's not as important of a weapon upgrade. And if you look down here, you see that the charge time is 1. So this fires, you know, in round 1. It recharges every round. So this weapon actually fires every single round, and then it has a total of 2 shots. And last but not least, it has high impact torpedoes, which are kinetic weapons. And if we click on the weapons right here, you see that it has, you know, decent damage, better than the previous energy mounts that we just saw, but not as high as the phaser turrets that we saw, which was the first one. And then, you know, decent stats. And then down here again, charge time. Here you see that, you know, it fires in round 2. It fires every other round and has 2 shots. So, you know, one of the reasons why I think the Korinar is I guess a little bit overpowered, or one of the best, or the best G4 Rare in my opinion, is because of the weapons, right? So if you look at this, you've got a really powerful weapon that fires in round 1 and fires 3 times, and you have a decent weapon that fires every single round in these phaser banks that fires every single round. So you have 5 shots in round 1, and that's a decent number of shots, especially with 3 of those being a very high-powered shot. In addition, if we had done the math on all 3 weapons, we see that the firing pattern for this ship is that first in round 1 it fires 5 times, in round 2 it fires 4 times, and then in round 3 it fires 2 times. So whereas the other 2 G4 Rare ships, their cycle, I guess their weapon cycle, be it in 2 rounds or 3 rounds, is basically 10 shots per weapon cycle. For the Korinar, it actually fires 11 shots, so it has 1 additional shot. The only thing is that whereas some of the others are maybe in rounds 1 and 2, the Korinars are in 1, 2, and 3. But it kind of makes up for that because it has 3 really high-powered shots in round 1. So that's a brief look at, I guess, the weapon mounts on it. One of the other things that I've mentioned before for the G4 ships is that the big paywall is basically the ship components. So you can take a kind of quick look at that. You see that, you know, this phaser turret, it requires almost 44,000 uncommon Explorer parts, G4 Explorer parts. This one is about 87,000, so 88,000, I guess, uncommon parts. This requires 73,000. Even the cargo bay takes like 15,000, which is ridiculous for something that's basically useless. The warp engines, 20,000 plus 26,000 for shields. and then another 26,000 for the engines. If you do all the math on there, I think it's around 200 to 250,000 parts, and this is after all the ship component research, savings research that I've done. So it's a significant amount of components, and aside from mats, this is probably my #1 barrier for upgrading these ships. All right, so we touched briefly on the ship components and the ship itself, and you've seen it on screen for a long time, so you guys can have a good idea of what it looks like. We had talked briefly a bit about some of the PvP crews. One of the other things is I wanted to point out is kind of an alternative crew. I like the TOS crew a lot. I've got the setup right now with TOS O'Hara as captain. So if I want a kind of a real generic type crew, one of the things I would look at would be swapping TOS O'Hara with TOS Kirk, and then including maybe TOS Spock. So if we do something like this, you see that the synergy gives TOS Kirk a pretty beefy boost to damage. So I don't know why this still says 50%. It's not 50% because that's the base on TOS Kirk. He's at 150% damage for energy weapons based on the defense of all the officers on the ship. And then note it's cumulative. So what that means is that it increases every single round. So that's actually a pretty significant buff when you take into consideration that most exocomps are like 50% damage to all, or maybe plus 200% explorer damage. And plus 200% explorer damage is a grade 4 exocomp. So most people aren't even seeing that. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is 150% damage off of defense to all officers per round is actually pretty significant. So anyway, Kirk Captain is one of the alternate crews that I have used for this ship. TOS O'Hara is still here because her officer ability is really good. We kind of talked about this in a couple of other videos, so I won't go into detail here, but basically it's gonna give you more hull damage when you have TOS O'Hara on. It's just taking 20% of the damage that should have gone to the shields and placing that to hull damage. And then I put on Spock. I mean, sometimes I can use him, sometimes I don't. But basically, when you're fighting players, he kind of decreases critical hit damage of the opponent's ship by 75%. 75% is almost, off of base critical hit damage, it's cutting it in half. And one of the other things is if you have Sulu at a decent level, I think mine is maxed. But Sulu, yeah, he is maxed. So Sulu is also on an Explorer. He also gives you, as long as you have morale, he increases critical hit chance by 15%. So not as good as HG Worf, but not too bad either. So this is another alternate crewing possibility. The only downside is that his synergy with Kirk is a bit less. It's only 25% versus the 50% synergy for Spock. But increased critical hit chance is probably going to be it's probably superior to the increase of 25% damage to energy weapons. Oh, and one of the other things, before I forget, is with TOS Kirk is that it says for energy weapons only. And if you recall back on the ship itself, if we look at the weapon mounts, we have 2 energy weapons and we have 1 kinetic. The kinetic weapon here actually does a decent amount of damage, so TOS Kirk won't affect this damage at all. It only affects the energy weapons. And I would say he works well on the Korinar primarily because the biggest weapon on this ship is this phaser turret. And we can deal a lot of damage pretty fast with it. So just keep in mind that TOS Kirk is not a ubiquitous plus % damage to all weapons. It's just only for energy weapons. So it's important for you to kind of look at what type of weapon mounts you guys have on the ships when you're crewing with TOS Kirk as captain. So here's an example from a while ago. Note I was only Ops 49. My Korinar was only tier 6. It wasn't really a double tap on this Corvus. I can double tap it now, but I back then I think it was the 3rd or 4th hit on that Corvus. And note that that's just the baby Corvus. There's no upgrades on that ship. It's just been leveled to level 5. So this was my A crew back then. I've got Yuki, Captain, Marcus, and HG Worf to kind of do my maximum amount of damage. It's not a bad performance against a ship that's in every way, shape, and form is superior, especially in terms of shield health and hull health. So I was pretty happy with this performance. So this is the second example that I had. This was from, I guess, recently, because it was Ops 54, and my Korinar is now tier 8, so you can see that. So I was able to one-shot an Enterprise A in this case, and Crunchy, I think he was crewing to try and hit my Corvus at this point, because that's why he probably had TOS O'Hara as captain. So, in this case, I wasn't scoring any critical hits because he had TOS O'Hara captain. So I was going primarily off of Marcus and his ability. And also, my TOS O'Hara was countering his HG Worf. And you see that, at 26 million in power, I was beating a 37.5 million power Enterprise A. Granted, it's only a tier 6A, but the hull health on this ship was significantly higher than on my Korinar. So regardless, I think I was just very impressed when I saw this result come through. So thanks for tuning in today. That's basically what I wanted to show on the Korinar, the ship itself, as well as a couple of example PvP loadouts and some actual real world performance in terms of what I've been able to do with it. If you guys are anywhere near G4 territory and you're considering what direction you should go, I would strongly recommend thinking about going Klingon as one of your factions just for this ship. And in addition, for the G4 rares, it's perfectly okay to get 2 ships. And what 2 ships you want is really up to you. But definitely, I would make the Korinar one of my top choices when going through that consideration set. So as always, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. Have a great night. Thank you.